Hello and welcome to this video on how to create a simple between groups vignette study in Gorilla. But first, what is a vignette study? Well, in essence, vignettes are just stories written by researchers. And between the individual stories, one or two parameters might change whilst everything else stays the same. So, for example, the main character's gender could change from a man to a woman, or it could be a different race, or it could be a different situation or location, like from a bar to a street, that kind of thing. And the reason why researchers use vignette studies is so that they can explore how people's attitudes and opinions affect the way that they may make things like judgments or react to certain sort of information and that kind of thing. So they're very, very broad and very, very useful in this context. And it allows us to be able to look at the differences between different people when presented with specific information. So, for example, how a group of people may react to a male perpetrator of a crime over a female perpetrator of a crime. So before I start to describe exactly how we're going to build this study, I just want to make it clear that for people who are not students at my university, there are a couple of things you won't have access to. These are predominantly just the templates that are used to create a couple of these questionnaires. But for 90% of the content, you're going to be able to get on with the task, build the study. So hopefully it will still be really useful for you. The only thing you won't have is the templates. So to create our between groups vignette study, we're going to make 3 questionnaires to start with. The first of which is going to be a participant information sheet and consent form. And for that, we are going to be using a template that you can find on my Moodle page if you're an LTU student. The second questionnaire is going to be made from scratch, and it's the demographics questionnaire where we're going to be asking the following questions: age, gender, biological sex, and we're also going to be asking for a unique SONA ID. The final questionnaire that we're going to be making is going to be the debrief sheet, and that's going to be another template as well. So you would find that on Moodle. Next up is going to be the Gorilla task. So this is really the meat and bones of the project, and what it's going to do is present one of 2 vignettes to our participants, and then also ask them to pass verdict as to whether the perpetrator is guilty or innocent. And then finally, it's going to ask them to rate their confidence on their previous decision on whether that person was guilty or innocent. And they're going to be rating that out of 10. So 0 being least confident, 10 being most confident. And this is what the study is kind of going to look like in our Gorilla experiment when we pull everything together to create the flow chart for our participants. All of the participants will start at the start. Then they'll move on to the participant information sheet and consent form. Then they will, assuming that they give full consent, then they will complete the demographics questionnaire. After that, they'll go into a randomiser where I'll allocate them either to vignette 1 or vignette 2. So this is where the between groups element comes in. We're going to end up with a group of people who have only seen vignette 1 and another group of people who have only seen vignette 2. After they've read the vignette, they're going to be asked to pass their verdict on the sort of perpetrator in the story. And then finally, we're going to ask them for their confidence. After that, all participants come together to view the same debrief sheet, and then they hit the finish node, which is the end of the project. Okay, so now we're going to start working within Gorilla itself. So you're going to need to sign into Gorilla, and eventually you'll come to what's called the landing page, which is what's on the screen at the moment. And what I want you to do is to just jump down to create a new project and type in your new project title. So I'm just going to put in between groups vignette. Okay, it's really important that you use really clear names for your projects so that if you are collaborating with other people or you need any help from say your subscription technician, like this is what I do at my job, but also, you know, if you're working with your principal investigator or your supervisor, you know, so they can identify your project and understand what it's about. Just labeling it something like a dissertation means nothing to a supervisor who has several students working with them. then they're just going to have a big long list of this, and it's not going to make much sense. So name it something that is salient and easy for somebody to recognize. So I might also put in my name here. So I might put in between groups Vignette Caspar. Participants aren't going to see this. This is simply just the project name. Click create, and then it's going to ask you to create either a task builder or a task or a questionnaire. We're not really interested in these bottom three sort of builders at the moment. We're just going to be working in these two in this video. So the first one you're going to click on is the questionnaire builder. So we click on that. We're going to create a new one, and I'm going to call it participant information sheet and consent form. I usually use this acronym just to make it easy for me. I can recognize it straight away, and click create. Now what we've got is the questionnaire builder screen, and what we can see is on the left hand side there's a couple of bits of information I want to talk about. At the top here we've got the questionnaire name, which we can edit by clicking the pen if we wanted to. We've also got this little sort of chip that tells us what version it is and who is currently editing it. This is really important again if you have collaborators on your project, because they cannot edit a task or a questionnaire whilst you're editing it. Underneath, we've got some navigation. So this is the sort of home page for Gorilla. So if I click on that, it takes you back to the landing page. If I just jump back in here, you've got your projects page, which will show you all the projects that you're currently enlisted on. So this is what I mean, where it's got like project 1.1. The names are there, but sometimes it comes through as a member of staff because they created the project but the students working on it. It can just get messy, so just make sure you label it something clear. And then this option here will just take you back to your project view, which is this screen here. So just jumping back into the PISC, what I want to now do is talk about this column here. So this is our little left-hand side menu where we can navigate between our pages screen, which is what we're looking at now, our stimuli screen, whereas if we wanted to add any images or any sound or videos, that kind of thing, this is where we would do that. We've also got our scoring tool. This is a particularly useful tool in Gorilla that's very, very powerful and can save you a lot of time at the end when it comes to data processing, data analysis, that kind of thing. But we're not going to use it today. We don't need it for today. I'll do other videos that will cover this tool in more detail, but just know that's where it is, and it's really, really useful. These last two, settings and scripts, again, don't often use them for the questionnaire builder. And we're not going to be using it in this example because I'm trying to keep it as light and as quick as possible. Jumping back on the pages, now what we've got is Gorilla presents questionnaires in orders of pages. So page 1 is always first, page 2, page 3, page 4, etc. They all work. So if I just add in a couple of new pages here, what you'll also notice at the bottom is that we've got this randomize page order option toggle. If we turn that on, we can randomize all of the pages in here except particular pages. So let's say we wanted all our participants to see page 1 first, but then we didn't mind which order these two pages came in. So one person might see page 2 first, another might see page 3 first, and so on. It's really straightforward, quite clean and easy to do. But again, we don't really need it for this walkthrough today. On the right hand side here, we've got the More Actions button. On here, we can see the version history. So when we commit and edit our tasks, we can see what's been done, when it was done, and whether or not we want to sort of revert back to an earlier version of the task. We can also cancel our changes, import and export. I'm going to talk about this in a little bit. The green commit button is really important. This is how we handle saving our Gorilla tasks. Now, as you're working on your Gorilla tasks, it automatically saves all of the changes that you make, but it doesn't make that available in the experiment, which is what your participants complete, until you've committed it and updated your nodes to the most updated version of your questionnaire. It doesn't make much sense right now, but I will demonstrate that at the end of the video. We've also got a preview button, so this does exactly what it says on the tin. You basically click on that to see what your questionnaire is going to look like to your participants. And then we have another new page button at the bottom here, just underneath. This yellow bar suggests to you or is an indicator that you're currently editing your questionnaire. When you've committed, it will turn green, and I'll show you that shortly. So the first thing we're going to do is our participant information sheet and consent form, and we're going to import that from templates. So you click on More Actions, click on Import, and then I'm just going to select my template that I've downloaded from Moodle already and click Import. After a couple of seconds, it loads in, and we can see by clicking on the individual pages what our participant information sheet and consent pages look like. So first thing we need to do is I just need to explain this layout to you a little bit. So this is the page. It's kind of like a live preview for your participants so that they can see, you can see what they're going to see. And in this template, I have populated it with a lot of sort of dummy information that follow the university's prescribed participant information sheets and all that sort of stuff. So your job as one of my students is to come in and change this text to match the what you've had ethically approved, and they should typically fall under the same categories. In order to do this, all you need to do is click on the section that you want to edit. So for example, this section here, and then jump over to the text on the right hand side, and then just type in your study name, or the text that you want to edit. A little note on how Gorilla arranges the content on its page. It uses a system called object and components. So an object can literally be anything. If anything, it's just a name, right? It's a name associated with something on the screen. But the component is what's contained within that object. So if we have a look here, we have an object called logo, which is defined here under identification name logo. And this is referring to the logo object at the top. And in it, it has a component called image. And in there, image has various settings that we need to set in order to present the image that we're going to show the way that we want to show it. Whereas if we look at project name, so this is another object, it's this object here. Project name is the name of the object, but it actually has a text component which is different from an image component for obvious reasons. It shows text, whereas an image shows an image, and it too has its own settings that we can define or change so that we can present the information how we want it to present. Something I've discovered with working with students is that they are sometimes a bit confused when they're presented with the text box and that they see that there is no what we call rich text editor in place. So a rich text editor is kind of like what you get on Word, where you've got buttons that you can click to define like whether something is bold or italicized, or whether it's header 1, header 2, header 3. Gorilla, for brevity, has decided to use a system called Markdown or HTML. Now, Markdown is a very sort of fast-paced typing system that allows you to type instructions within the text that the browser understands and renders it properly. So for example, here we've got participant information sheet is preceded by a single hashtag. So what that tells Gorilla is to render that text as a header 1. So in Word, where we've got under our style options, we've got header 1, which is like the largest header, or other than title. This will now style it like that. Whereas for project title, I've preceded it with 3 hashtags, which means that that's telling the browser to publish it or display it like header 3, so a bit smaller than header 1. If I was to change this now and just remove one of the hashtags, you can see that project title has gotten slightly bigger because it's changed it from a header 3 to a header 2, and so on. I'm not going to waste time and go through all of Markdown with you, but what I want to do is show you where you can see Markdown information, and you can do that by clicking on these little eyes next to each component. So you can see next to the image one that there is a component there, but also there is a component, there's an eye next to the text component. By clicking that, it will open the component information under the objects guide in Gorilla's official support documentation, which is really, really good, very thorough, and there's a lot of information there. And it will tell you a little bit more detail about how you can use the text component. But where we find our Markdown information is here under this link. So if we click on that, it will open up and describe to you in this lovely table all of the ways that Markdown can work. So how you can use Markdown to style your text. The one thing I have noticed in recording these videos is that there is a slight error here where they're using the asterisk to denote a bullet point. This is standard Markdown, but it's rendering as a number list for some reason here. That's not correct. They should just be bullet points. But if you use this within Gorilla, it will come out like this. It will come out like a bullet point list even. I did mention as well that you can use HTML, which is different from Markdown, to style your text. You can access the sort of HTML information by clicking on this link here, and it will talk you through in very much the same situation, same layout, how you can use HTML. And HTML is a bit more complicated, but it does offer you a greater level of control over Markdown. So you can have a little perusal of that. And that's quite useful, I think. Okay, so we've talked about that. We've renamed our questionnaire. That's all we need to do. Our participant information sheet. I'm not going to go through and change all of the text because it's not really needed. This survey, this study is not going live to anyone. So I'm not collecting any data. I'm not interested in that. So what I'm going to do is just jump to the next page, the consent page. So this is where we are going to request consent from our participants before they complete our study. And as a university, we have a predefined consent form, and it's really, really important that you do not change the wording of any of these statements apart from potentially these three here, where it marks them as if appropriate. Realistically, you should include these questions only if they're appropriate to your study, and you should remove the text if appropriate before it goes in front of participants. The reason for that is that it can cause a bit of ambiguity and the participants aren't sure whether or not they need to answer this response. So to do that, all you need to do is click on the consent form object, which is here, scroll down, and you'll notice under the label label part of the response box, where there is if appropriate, you can simply just delete them like that, and that will remove them from the questionnaire. Or if you wanted to keep one of them in, you just need to delete the if appropriate text like that, and it will update your consent form to be to how you want it to look. And that's all of the changes that you need to make with your consent form. Anything else you shouldn't really change. Now, one thing you do or should always check is click on the additional settings, and you should always make sure that your consent form is required. So typically within a study, almost all of the questions will be optional. And we do this for ethical reasons, so that a participant who doesn't necessarily want to share or respond to a question, they don't have to. But when it comes to consent, we must be sure that our participants are giving full consent to before they take part in our study. And to do that, what we do is ensure that our questions are required. And the way that we do that in Gorilla is that all questions are required by default, and otherwise we have to make them optional. Now, to check whether they are optional or not, we just need to click on the Show Additional Settings option down here. Have a little scroll down, we'll see Optional down here. And if this is grey, this toggle is grey, that means optional is off. If it's blue, it means it's on. For this part of the survey, we want these questions to be required, so we leave it off. For all others, with the exception of one, which I'll discuss shortly, we leave it on. Okay, so we're happy with that. We've made our participant information sheet a consent form, so now we can commit. So what you do is click the green commit button in the top right, like I just did, and you need to provide a bit of a description of what you've done. And this is really important because it will help you figure out if you've got an issue later on, which version might have affected your overall study, so you can correct it appropriately. So what we did was imported PISC, edited the project title, and removed unnecessary questions from consent. Click commit, and you'll notice now that the yellow bar has gone green, and it's now in a green version 2, which means that that is the absolute latest version. Okay, so we're going to jump back into our project. So click on the Between Groups vignette thing here, click Create New under Tasks and Questionnaire, and click Questionnaire again. Now we're going to create a questionnaire from scratch, and we're going to create our demographics. So type in demographics, and then there we are. We're back into the page builder. We're now going to jump onto page 1 and we're going to add some objects. Previously in the import we didn't need to add some objects, we just removed some. Now we're actually going to start adding things and building questionnaires from scratch. So to do that we're going to come over to the right hand side over here and look at the objects menu, and where we see the add objects button we're just going to give that a quick click. First thing we're going to do is we're going to ask them the participant's age. And for that, we're going to look into our questions section here, and we're going to select number entry because that's the most appropriate type of question to ask our participants for their age, because we're just going to ask them, how old are you in years? So click create. Over here, we're going to look at the object name section and change that to age. Really important that you get into the habit of naming your objects so that they're easier to identify if there is ever any debugging problems further down the line. For the text, we're going to say, how old are you in years? And a question mark. You'll notice that there is an option here to use limits, and you can absolutely use the minimum as 18 if you're going to not allow any participants under the age of 18. You will need to have special ethical permissions to do this if you're intending to do this. That's because children or people under the age of 18 are considered vulnerable and therefore need extra sort of checks in order to make sure that the survey, the content, all of that is suitable for that age group. Personally, I don't like using the minimum. Instead, I would use an additional process where I can screen out participants that freely respond that they're less than 18. That way I can be reasonably certain that I have tried my very best to make sure that nobody under the age of 18 has participated. Essentially, if you put a limitation in like 18 and it comes to a participant entering their date and it says, oh no, you can't proceed because you're underage, they're just going to change their age and years on the page and continue on. Whereas if they have answered honestly and then they're pushed through and screened out afterwards, that's more safer. I'll do a separate video on how to do that so that it's, because that's quite a useful tool to have. The final thing we need to do is click on additional settings, and as I've just mentioned, we need to make the question optional. And there we go, we've made our age question. Next, we're going to ask our participants gender. Now, I like to ask participants their gender, like ask them to describe it freely. So I'm not giving them a multiple choice or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is use a comment box. So this is just a free form text response, and I'm basically going to put in, please describe how you identify, e.g. man, woman, non-binary. So this is allowing them to respond however they wish to this gender question. I'm also going to call it gender, but it is I am also kind of guiding them towards the type of response that I want. And then we're going to click on show additional settings and make that optional. Next, we're going to click on add object again, and this time we're going to add our sex question. And for that, we're going to use multiple choice. So we're going to come over here and select multiple choice. That's because we kind of want to force them to decide whether they are male biologically or female biologically. But I always like to offer a third option as well of prefer not to say, just so that we are getting some sort of a response. But again, all of this depends on what you've been ethically approved. Okay, so you click on multiple choice, click on your object, change this to sex, and then the question will be, what is your biological sex? And in here we would say female, male, prefer not to say. You could add in other options as well, such as intersex and so on, but I'm just keeping it to this level for this example. Then finally, and it's especially important on this one because it is a sensitive topic, we want to make this one optional. Our final question that we're going to ask is our SONA ID question. Now, as a university, we use SONA Systems as a research participation platform where we ask all our undergraduate students to participate in research as part of their degree, specifically level 4, level 5, or first and second year. And so this system provides a unique ID number to all our participants that are anonymous to researchers. Only the admin for the site and the actual individual participants know what their number is. And it's a really useful tool to record. And you should really, where if you're using such a system or recruiting from such tools like Sona, you should really include these questions. So we're going to add another object, and the Sona ID is actually a 4-digit number. So we're going to use number entry, click on that again, and we're going to type in Sona ID as our name, and then I'm going to put in if you are an LTU Sona ID. Okay. Now, contrary to what I've said about making questions optional, I would say that your unique ID question should be required when you're working within Gorilla. The reason being is that at the end, when you come to marketing or like when you come to recruiting participants to your study, you will have two separate experiments, one for social media or more general, like, simple link to people, and then another that will push them through to Sona. So only people that are recruited through Sona will be providing a Sona ID, if that makes sense. So basically, some people will be able to log on and optionally answer this question, and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail later. Perhaps that's actually better. It'll be a bit more easy for you to understand. Anyway, so we've created them and we've made that one is not optional. That's great. So we've created our questionnaire, demographics questionnaire. So we're just going to click on commit and we're going to say created demographics, made age, gender, sex, and Sona ID, non-optional. Oh, that's a bit optional, non-optional. Okay, brilliant. And commit. So there we go. We've created our demographics. Next up, we're going to create our debrief. And again, we're going to be using a template. So we're going to click on there because I forgot to change the name to something obvious. Select debrief, more actions, import, select debrief, import, give it a second. There we go. And again, just like the participant information sheet, I'm not going to go through and change all of this text, but all you would need to do is click on the particular section, go over to the text component, and then copy and paste in your ethically approved text that you've had. So I'm going to hit commit again, imported debrief. Oops, debrief. I can't even spell today. Debrief, click commit. Brilliant. And that is your questionnaires made. Okay, so next we're going to start working on the tasks. So to do that, we're going to click on the project again. So back into our Between Groups Vignette project. And we're going to click on Create New under Tasks and Questionnaire, and we're going to select Task. Here, I'm going to call this Vignette. I can never spell that correctly. Click Create. And now we're in a slightly different view from the questionnaire builder. We're now in what's called the task builder. And pretty much everything else is exactly the same with the exception of we now have displays instead of pages. And an interesting or an important differentiation between that is where pages move vertically, displays are more like a PowerPoint. So each one of the screens within a display is like a slide deck. And then each display is like its own unique slide deck, if that makes sense. We also have one other additional sort of option here. Instead of the scorer, we have spreadsheets. If we have a look at this, hopefully the spreadsheets will make a little bit more sense once we start building the task. But in essence, all a spreadsheet does in Gorilla is manage the flow of the sort of activities that the participant does. So each row represents a different display, and then they'll move through the successive screens within that display before moving on to the next row. There are a couple of nuances to this, like randomization, that we can use to sort of control the flow. So if we wanted to shuffle trials, that kind of thing, we can use randomization. But we'll discuss that as we encounter it. Okay, so jumping back to displays now, we're going to look at the first display. And what we're going to do is change display 1, and we're going to call this instructions. Click confirm, click on screen 1. We're going to click on the instructions screens and click confirm. But again, this is very, very similar to what we've done in the questionnaire. You just need to click on the object on the left-hand side here, and you can enter in your text all over here. And that's essentially the first screen done. So what we would do here is please read the following vignette carefully and respond to the questions afterwards. That's a terrible, terrible way of describing what a participant should do. Spend a little bit more time and only enter in text that you've had ethically approved. Jumping back into displays, I'm going to add a new display now, and I'm going to call this trial and click create. And then here, I'm going to change the screen name to vignette and click confirm. Then I'm going to add 2 more screens. The second one is going to be verdict, and then the third one is going to be confidence. Okay, and the reason why, and I'm going to change that as well to instruction sheet. The reason why I'm labeling all of these is again for the same reason why we do it in the questionnaires, is that if there is a problem at any point with the way that your study is functioning, it is easier to debug and figure them out if you've labeled things appropriately. If you haven't, it's going to be a pain. So please get into the habit of naming things properly. In trial 1, we're first going to hit on the vignette, and we're going to use the blank screen template and click confirm. Now what I'm going to need to do is to provide a short bit of text just to tell the participant what they should be doing. So we're going to click on add object. And now this one looks a little bit different from the questionnaire one. There's a lot more options than there are in the questionnaire, and it would take me forever to go through each and every one of them. Anyway, we're going to first use text. We're going to click on there, and we're going to call this instructions, and it's going to have a text component, and we're going to click done. On the right hand side now, we don't need to change the name there because I set it up when I was adding the object, but what we do need to do is enter in our text. So please read the following vignette carefully before progressing onto the questions. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm happy with that text, although I will admit it's not the best. What I do want to do is have a little fiddle with the text size, so I might make this a little bit bigger, but also the size of the box that the text is in. So if we come down here and look at these numbers down here, along the x-axis is the horizontal, the y is the vertical. So I want to make this box a bit wider, so I'm just going to put that in at 10. Next, I'm going to want to reposition it to have it at the top of the screen. So I can do that by clicking and dragging the box. You can see those arrows there, and I can position it there. Alternatively, I can change the positions in the XY coordinates there. Weirdly, for some reason, Gorilla uses an inverted Cartesian sort of grid system. It confuses me a little bit because it is negative moving upwards and positive moving downwards, and I have no idea why they've chosen to do that. But anyway, just so that you're aware that that's what's happening. Next, we're going to add in another text box, and this is going to be where we're going to put the vignette. So for the time being, I'm just going to put in vignette 1 there, and then I'm going to change that name to vignette. And then I want to add in another object, which is our continue button, which is there. So click on that and then just drag that down to the bottom. So probably there, so that it's nice and centralized. Clicking back on the vignette, I might want to make that a little bit bigger again, maybe not as big as the instructions. And what you'll notice is that what I've entered in this text box obviously appears on the screen, and that's great and probably what we want. But in fact, what we're going to do is something slightly more clever, and we're going to use the binding system to be able to control the way that this screen presents the information. So binding allows us to link the source of the text for this text component to a column in the spreadsheet that I showed you earlier. So if we just have a look over here, alongside the text box, there is a link icon. If we click on that, the link icon is actually binding. And then we click on spreadsheet. Usually that's the default. Select column, select create new. Let's call this vignette and then click bind. And the text has disappeared and we've just got that there. So what this is telling us is that it's looking in the spreadsheet. That's what the green S stands for, or rather the white S in the green field. And this is the column name that it's looking for. If we now jump over to our spreadsheet, what we also see is that a second column has been added, which is the vignette, which is called vignette. So what we're going to do is add in a new row. We're just going to call this trial, and that cell has gone green. And the reason why that's gone green is because it's been able to find the display. If I put in trials, you'll notice it's gone white. If I jump back to our displays, I've actually named this one trials. So if trial even. So if I come back in and I remove that S off the end, it's found it. So it means that it knows it can access that display. So it's a really useful sort of visual tip to know that you've actually linked your display with your spreadsheet. And then in vignette 1, in the vignette column, I'm just going to put in vignette 1. I'm not going to waste time writing a whole vignette and then changing it for the task because it would just waste time. Anyway, so if I jump back and look into the vignette screen, what you'll notice now is that because in my spreadsheet I have entered the text vignette 1, it's come up on the task. But if I change this of this is a vignette, isn't it great? I jump back into the screen, it will present the text there as well. So it might be important to make the boxes wider, make it a little taller as well, so that you know that you've got enough space for your vignette. You might want to move it around or change it on here. But essentially we've created our vignette, which is really, really nice. However, we want to present them with two, and the method that I'm going to use for this version of this task is going to be using different spreadsheets. So what I want to do here is rename the current spreadsheet, spreadsheet 1, by clicking on the drop down, click on rename, and I'm just going to call that V1. Click save. And then I'm going to create new spreadsheet and I'm going to call that V2, click create, and then I'm just going to copy the existing spreadsheet and change this text here. This is another vignette and it's awful. Okay. But when we jump back to the screen now, because currently it doesn't know which spreadsheet to pull from, it's not showing any text. But if we press play, we select our V1 spreadsheet, it will show us that this is a vignette, isn't it great? If we use vignette 2 or spreadsheet 2, it shows us this is another vignette and it's awful. Okay, so we kind of get an idea of how this is going to work. And we've pretty much built the vignette side. Now we've got to make the verdict. So to do that, just click on verdict in the top left, click on two-way force choice, click confirm, and then select the placeholder icon here. So the image object here. We don't need an image on this screen, so we're just going to click on this vertical ellipsis here and click delete object, and that will remove it. Then I want to just pull the A and B's up to the top, and then we're going to change these responses. So one is going to be guilty. And what you'll notice, actually, this is a good time to talk about this. What you'll notice is that this object that I've just called guilty actually consists of several different components. So here we have the text component, And then here we have the border hover component. So this changes the way that the box looks when you hover over it or when you click on it. So if you normal, it's black. When you hover over it, it kind of goes like this weird little pale blue color. If you click on it, then it turns bright blue, and if it's disabled, then it will turn black. You can also link these to the spreadsheets or variables or anything like that, so you can really customize these tools. It also has a third component called the click response component, and this basically means what do you do when somebody clicks on this object? And so essentially it's like adding an event listener to this object to say when someone clicks on this text, this guilty text, this is what's going to happen. It's going to pass a response, which is going to be guilty, into the Gorilla engine and save that in your data. So then we just need to do exactly the same thing for B and just type in innocent. So that's the name of that. Type in innocent. Like that. Happy with all of this, and I just need to change the text on the response as well. And then what I might do as well is just make the boxes a little bit wider so that they look nice on the screen. And that's our verdict page done. Next up is our confidence page, and here we're going to use a blank screen again. Click confirm, and we're going to add a new object which is going to be text. So this is going to provide our participants with please indicate how confident you were in your previous decision. Okay, or words to that effect. Make sure it's all ethically approved. I'm just going to call that confidence instructions. I'm then going to add another one, and I'm going to use a slider control. So this is a way that we can slider response, sorry. So if we click on response, scroll down, where is it? Might be better to just search. So if we type in slider there, just click add, click done, and then we just want to change some things. So I'm just going to call this confidence. Maximum value, I previously stated I wanted it to be 10. I'm going to add some labels to the left and right. So here I'm going to add least confident, and then for the right side label, most confident. Probably going to make it a little bit wider, so I'm going to make that 10. I'm also going to make it a bit taller, and I want to increase the text size to 26 so it's nice and clear for the user. Maybe make that a bit wider again. And then I'm going to need to add a continue button. Drag that down to the bottom there. I don't like that, so I'll make that a bit wider and make that text 26 as well. Okay, so there we go. We might want to add some instructions at the top. So to do that, we would just click on there and then just enter in your text. Please judge the offender in the vignette. Are they guilty or innocent? I want that to 10 and I'm going to make that text 22. Make that 26. There we go. Okay. So there we have it. So we've got our vignette, participant comes in, blah, 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 blah. They then go to their verdict, blah, 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 and then go and do their confidence, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to commit that. We're going to say created vignette task, added vignette spreadsheets 1 and 2, and our verdict and confidence questions. Click commit, and we're done. So if we jump back to our project now, we can see that we've got our 3 questionnaires, our participant information sheet, our consent form, our demographics, our debrief, and our vignette. So the next up is we need to put all of these together into a flow chart, very similar to what we saw in the PowerPoint at the beginning, to be able to essentially direct our participants through our experiment. So to do that, we're going to click on Create New under Experiments. We're going to call this Vignette Sona, and we're going to click Create. Okay. And then we're going to click Edit. Now what we're in here is the vignette, or rather the experiment builder. So it's another building tool. And what we want to do is, I'm just going to move these apart a little bit. We're going to add in our different components. So here is the start box, here is the end box, and we're going to add in our first questionnaire, which is going to be participant information sheet. And then between that, I want to add in another questionnaire, which is going to be our demographics. Just going to move these around so it's a little less spider webby. And then after that, we're going to want to add in a randomizer. So we didn't build a randomizer, we're just going to use a predefined control, which is here. So we're going to select randomizer. We're going to have two groups. I'm going to call one V1 for vignette 1. I'm going to call another one V2 for vignette 2. And I've got a ratio of 1 to 1, which means that for every one participant that goes to one group, another will go to another group. So it remains balanced and nice. Shouldn't have done that. There you go. So next what we're going to do is add in our tasks. So we're going to click on the blue plus there, select vignette at the bottom, and it will add it in for us. Now, if I just move this down here, what you can see is these two white dots in the randomizer. We haven't got one over here. So all we're going to do is just duplicate our vignette tasks. So we have two of them. Oh God, it's a little jumpy. We're going to drag that down to vignette 2 there. Okay. Then in between that, we're going to add in our debrief. So we're going to go back into questionnaire and add in our debrief. Drag that down, drag that into there. So the participants come through, they go to vignette 1 or vignette 2, and then they go to the debrief. The last thing we need to do is to specify the spreadsheets, which ones of these are going to play when the participant comes to one of these groups. So this one goes to V1. If we click on that, we can see that that spreadsheet is set to V1. But if we click on V2, we just need to change that to V2. So now when we look at the actual tasks, we can see in very small text, there we go, spreadsheet 1, V1, spreadsheet 2, V2, so that people who come down this line will do this version of the task, people who come down this line will do this version. We can now hit preview and see what the study looks like. So give it a second to load. Yep, it's an amazing study, blah, 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 blah. Click next. Provide our consent. Yes, 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 yes. Click next. Then we're going to go into our demographics. So how old are you in years? Describe how you're a man, and I'm male, and 2255. Click next. Got our task instructions, marvelous. Then I've got this is another vignette, it's awful. All right, so I'm in V2 here. Click on next. I'm going to say that that person was guilty, but I'm really not confident in that. Come to the debrief sheet, fab. That's exactly the workflow that we set out at the beginning. So what do we need to do now? Well, the final thing here would be is to commit this and say built workflow of the experiment for Sona. Now, if you remember right at the beginning, I did talk about the difference between Sona and social media, and that is important, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So we're going to jump into recruitment here, and we're going to talk about recruitment policies. So if we click on change recruitment policy, we've got a few options here. Disable, which means that it won't recruit any participants to it. Link, simple link, very, very useful for things like social media. So you can use that one. That's the one I recommend my students to use for social media. Email, tend not to use because that can be a little problematic with ethics, or recruitment service. And you'll notice that there are several recruitment services here. The one that our students can use is, my students can use is Sona Systems. So you would click on that. It provides you with some information, but it also provides you with more information on Sona as well. But if you click on more here, it will talk you through how to set up the Sona study. There is a little bit of additional stuff to add on there. Once you've set your recruitment policy, the next thing you need to do is change your recruitment target. And to do that, you just click on the Change Recruitment Target button in the bottom left, select, and here you need to enter in the number of participants that you want to use. So you're going to select where you're getting your tokens from. If you are added to the LTU subscription, or if you're from a different institution, their subscription services, you would use a different source and you would select where that comes and you would request from there. So at the moment I have 50 available on my account, but I need another additional 50, so I can click request and it will go to that. So you click confirm, etc., all done and dusted. Lovely. So that's how you would request that. Important thing to bear in mind, only the project creator can change recruitment targets. The other tabs I'll cover in different videos. So that is fundamentally what you need to do in order to set up your recruitment. But as I've mentioned, that there is a slight difference between how we set things up for Sona and how we set things up for social media. So if you intend to recruit from those two sources, what you'll need to do is to create a new experiment, clone existing, select Vignette Sona, click create, and then you just need to change that name so it's obvious to you and anyone else that you are using. Change that to social media. And then there is one slight change that we need to do. We jump back into our project screen, click create new questionnaire, and we're going to clone existing demographics, and we're going to change this to demographics social media and save. And the one difference we're going to make is we're going to change this from required to optional. Oh, sorry, I need to go into edit there. I'm going to change this from required to optional, committed, changed Sona question from required to optional, click commit. And the reason why we've done that is because in our social media version, we want to change this questionnaire. So I'm going to remove this. Going to remove that node and add in our demographics for social media. And the reason why we're going to do that is because participants may not have Sona IDs when they come to this bit. So we're going to click commit, added in the social media demographics questionnaire, click commit, and then under recruitment, we're going to change the recruitment style to simple link. And then you will be able to use this URL here in your social media posts or wherever you're going to post it to be able to recruit your participants.
So one last thing I want to talk about is working with the experiment builder. If you need to go back and make a change to a questionnaire or a task because you've made a mistake or you want to add more content, what will happen is that the version numbers between the edited questionnaire and what's in the experiment will be out of date. So to sort of demonstrate this, I'm going to click into the Vignette Sona study, and what we can see here on our participant information sheet and consent form version 2, that's the current version that's on there. But if I go into the questionnaire and I click edit and I make a slight change, so let's say I add in name of researcher like that, and then commit, we're going to go from version 2 to version 3. So updated researcher name. Okay, and we're going to go from version 2 to version 3. And if we jump back into our experiment, what we should notice is that this is now still on version 2. So if we jump into edit, it will have this like weird little yellow icon with the two chevrons pointing up. This suggests that this is no longer up to date. So the way that we would fix that is by clicking on update nodes just there, update all nodes to latest version, and then click commit again, and then just say updated to latest PISC and click commit. And that's it. So that's just something that you really should remember to do at the end if you do have to change any aspect of your study after you've created your experiment. Similarly, don't forget we've got 2 versions as well. So if we go back and we go into the social media one, we'll notice that this participant information sheet is also the wrong version. So you'll have to do the same thing there, update the nodes, update to all latest versions, and then click commit. So date to latest, BISC, click commit, and that's it, and you're done. So thank you very much for sticking through this whole video. I know it's a bit of a long one, but anything with Gorilla takes a little bit of time to explain. If you've got any questions, please leave it in the comments. Bye.